former US Ambassador to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchison. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. You just got back to Texas after serving 3.5 years as ambassador to NATO. And so I'm wondering what it was like to come back home and be in Texas.
Well, always great to come home to Texas. Texas is my first love, and I'm glad to be home. A lot of it is resettling, as you can imagine, after being gone for 3.5 years. A lot of it is fixing things and repairing things and getting cars registered and, those kinds of things. When you're gone for 3.5 years, things pile up. So I'm back into the real world.
And you really just got back, didn't you?
Literally, really less than a week ago. So I'm just getting things going and really excited about some of the things that I'm looking at doing, because I certainly now have a foreign policy experience that I think I'll be able to help others and do some advising and consulting. So I'm really excited about all of that.
Let me ask you, you began your ambassadorship when President Trump was very vocal about criticizing NATO and the NATO members not paying their fair share for their defense. So talk to me a little bit about what that was like starting your job when the president was so adamant about that.
Yes, I saw a change through the 3.5 years for sure, because he campaigned in his first campaign against NATO and alliances where they weren't true alliances. Actually, I think he came around to understanding the importance of the alliance, the importance of having allies, so that we're speaking not with one voice, but with 30 voices plus 40 partners. We really have a partnership of 70 countries that have democracies, that have the rule of law, some stronger than others, but all of this, I think, made him realize, on top of the fact that the Europeans listened to the need to do more in defense spending. And during this time, an increase of $140 billion in defense spending that adds to our collective defense capabilities was done. So in the end, I think the president did come around to the importance of NATO, and also that the allies were stepping up and doing more for themselves, which also meant more for our collective defense.
Do you think he came around because they stepped up their payments into, defense?
Well, the way it works at NATO is that we allocate certain necessities to each country for them to purchase for their own defense, but also that would add to our collective capabilities. And that's where the allies did step up, and the president did see that they had. And it also, I think, during this 3.5 years, we could see how NATO stepped in to, in some ways, take the burden off the United States for the complete mission. Looking at Afghanistan, looking at Iraq, where we are doing so much to work with America in the same uh, in the same line of necessity, and that is to stabilize these countries where terrorism was fomenting, like Afghanistan, of course, where the 9/11 plot was hatched, and Iraq, where there was more Iranian influence with Iranian militias. And we needed to help them help themselves. And that's what NATO has done in conjunction with the United States and our allies in the what we call the de-ISIS coalition, which is several of our NATO allies and partners working together to rid Iraq of the terrorism that was building up there from Al Qaeda. So We have done a lot together, and I think NATO has proven its worth time and again over our 70-year history that working together we can do more than any one country going alone.
And how did you feel you left NATO as far as, you know, its relationship with the United States and members of the European countries? And what do you believe your greatest accomplishments were?
I think we left NATO very much stronger, and I made so many great friends at NATO with our allies, and many of them might have been critical of something that the United States had done, but they always know that really America is the leader of NATO, and we're the leader because we assess a risk and then we deter against it. And they want our leadership. So I think the accomplishment was holding America in the leadership of NATO, which we have done. Our US NATO team is very, they're good. We have a military team and we have a State Department diplomatic team working together in the US mission. And the leadership of America was shown time and again. And I think our allies understand that we do bring something to the table besides money. We bring the will to deter. And we push our allies, and many of them tell me they want to be pushed. They know they need to do more, and they have stepped up, and they're really great people. It was a great experience, and I think that we were successful in keeping everything together despite a lot of different happenings and different ones of our partnerships. Nevertheless, we took the steady course, and NATO is adapting, and we're adapting for a bigger potential risk in the future, and that is a rising malign influence of China.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about that in just a second, but let me ask you about what the White House said yesterday, that during a phone call, President Biden told German Chancellor Angela Merkel that his intention was to revitalize the transatlantic alliance, including through NATO and with the European Union. Um, when you hear that, what goes through your mind? Does the relationship need to be revitalized?
Well, I think there were tensions with Germany, especially when it was announced that there would be a troop movement of about 10,000 troops from Germany into other parts of Europe. But I do think that Germany is such an important ally, and we kept a very strong relationship in NATO. And I think what President Biden is now saying is that they also value Germany as an ally. They know there have been tensions, and that we are going to work together to strengthen that alliance, which means that Germany and France in the alliance that have been pushing for sovereign autonomy or semi-autonomy by Europe. We need to be watchful of that and make sure that it doesn't turn into a competition. Germany is a great ally. France is a great ally. We need all of the allies working in the same direction, going the same way for the transatlantic bond. Germany and France can't go it alone. The EU can't go it alone. Neither can America, but together we can be a strong deterrent against malign influence from Russia or China, and to stand against terrorism coming into Europe or into our countries. So I think that was a good call that, and Germany and America have been strong allies since Germany came into NATO. And I think they will be a strong ally, and I think that was a good message from the president to Chancellor Merkel.
You mentioned tension, and there was tension between now former President Trump, and some of the European leaders. I was reading 2 years ago, the French Prime Minister said to The Economist that the loss of American leadership in Europe led to the brain death of NATO. Do you remember that? And what was your reaction hearing that?
Well, of course, I remember it well when President Macron told a magazine interview that NATO was brain dead. And I think it was significant that at the leaders' meeting in London in 2019, December, that every leader in the room, and it was all of the heads of state of our NATO allies, every one of them said, we need the transatlantic bond. And we are supportive of the transatlantic bond. NATO is not brain dead. It is very vibrant. It is adapting. And it is the security umbrella for all of us. And that was a message to President Macron, I think, that don't walk away. Come in. If you think something's wrong, why don't you get involved more in NATO? And so I think that now we are going in the right direction. France and the US have a great bilateral relationship, but France is not as active in NATO. And I think if they would become a stronger ally in NATO, that we would have a stronger NATO. And we want them to do that. And we want Germany there, and we want all of our allies and partners to be looking to NATO as the transatlantic bond. When the EU is talking about strategic autonomy, they can't include North America in that. And we want to have North America, actually all of the Americas, Canada, as well as as America, but South America as well. And I think together we can build democracies, we can project stability, and we're going to need everyone on the same page as we are facing a very menacing Russia and China, as well as the effects of terrorism.
But some of the tension was also aimed at former President Trump. I mean, you referenced that December 2019 meeting, and there was that video that apparently the leaders were talking about. President Trump didn't realize they were on video. And so I'm wondering, how much more challenging did that make your job?
Well, of course, anytime you are trying to put forward the views of your country and the best of your country, if there are naysayers on any side, whether it's one of our other allies, there are going to be tensions, there are going to be disagreements. But I think the great thing about NATO is every ambassador was working together. Even if one of our countries was maybe in a tension with another country, you have bilateral disputes among allies. So it's not unusual. NATO has dealt with it before. And I will say that every one of the ambassadors there with whom I dealt was a positive thinker, always trying to work together to come to a consensus. One of the interesting things about NATO is that everything that we do, every statement we make, every mission we go into, has to be done by unanimous consent, because we are an alliance that has pledged our treasure to each other. And if one of us is attacked, we're all attacked. So it is an alliance with a consensus requirement. And that means that when there are bilateral disputes or tensions, that we work together to keep going in the right direction for our overall good.
All of this discussion brings up the question in my mind: how were you offered the job? How did this ambassadorship come to your front door, if you will?
Well, quite a surprise. I had never, ever thought of being an ambassador at all. When I left the Senate after 20 years, I was doing other things and enjoying the areas where I was contributing. But I got a call from Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State from Texas, who of course I knew. And he said, how would you like to be considered for an ambassadorship? And I said, no, I don't think so. But I don't want to say no right off the bat because I certainly never considered it. And so I did start thinking about it. He said, fine, call me back. So I started thinking about it. I talked to my son, who was still in high school. My daughter was also, I knew that she would not probably want to go, but I didn't think my son would either. But I talked to him and he said, I would like to go to high school in Europe. I'd like to see what it would be like. And I said, oh, really? Well, I called Rex back and I said, um, if it's NATO, I'll do it. I'm not looking for anything, but that would be of interest because I knew from my time in the Senate how important NATO is to our security. And sure enough, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a call from the White House and it was NATO. And so I said, okay. And I really pulled up stakes and got my son transferred into the Russell schools. And it turned out to be a fabulous experience, one I would never have even asked for or thought about, but it turned out to be wonderful because I do think that we have strengthened the alliance. And I made so many great friends for life, frankly, with the ambassadors. They're a great group of very seasoned diplomats. Um, I it's sort of was a joke around the office that I had more experience with Senate speak, not Diplo speak, but the allies really liked that. They liked the fact that I'd been in the Senate and they knew that I knew how things worked there. And I was able, I'm digressing a bit, but I was able to take all of our ambassadors with the Secretary General for the 70th anniversary of NATO celebration in 2019 in Washington. And so I was able to take them to the Senate and to get all of them to be able to see the Secretary General give an address to Congress from the floor of the House. And so it was just a wonderful experience. And I've bonded with all of my allies and ambassadors in that way. So I think that we've made NATO stronger. I think everyone acknowledges that America is essential in NATO. And so we need to just keep strengthening those bonds.
Just had several more questions for you, and I really appreciate your time. What was your relationship with President Trump when you would see him and speak with him directly?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we had good discussions. We had frank discussions. He always wanted to know, of course, if Europe was doing their part. And Europe was going in the right direction. I think he acknowledged that. And so we had good discussions. And sometimes he thought I was maybe not doing, maybe not doing as much in the way that he would like. And he told me that. And so I said, you know what? I really believe that this is such an important thing for America. I think we're going in the right direction. So we had a good, solid, just relationship about that. And because I was in Brussels, I really didn't see the president, but maybe three times, maybe four during leaders' meetings. And if the Secretary General went to Washington, I always went and was there for the meetings. But I was really able to do a lot on my own. And I think it was a positive in that respect.
Did you ever have days where you felt like, gee, maybe I need to leave?
Oh, sure. Of course. I mean, if something was particularly hard, I thought about, maybe leaving, but I didn't. I went all the way through. I think it was a good thing that I did, because once you make the relationships, I think you can work together better, you can negotiate better, and everything in NATO is a negotiation, as I mentioned before. If you're going to have consensus, you're going to give and take. And so I think it was really a positive to be able to stay. And, and no one ever suggested that I wouldn't. And I never, I thought from time to time, should I stay on? But I did. And I'm glad I did.
And I wanted to ask you, because you had mentioned the threats facing the United States and NATO from Russia and from China. And so, what do you think the best course is going forward for the US and NATO?
Well, first, we have to recognize that Russia and China are trying to divide our democracies. They're doing it through hybrid and cyber attacks. And China has been very strategic in building up its Arctic Road, its Belt and Road in Europe, where they're taking um, major assets in ports all through actually Latin America as well as Europe, up in the Arctic. And then, of course, in the area around Taiwan, Japan, there is constant effort to be divisive by China, and China into India as well, up in the Himalayas. So I think that one of our purposes has been to begin to show all of the things that are out there. And if you put it together, um, it really shows that we have to be very careful about China. We have to see what they're doing. We have to acknowledge it. We have to be prepared for it. We hope for the best with China. We don't want a bad relationship with China. We'd like to have trade. We'd like to have good relations. But when you put everything together with their military buildup, they have a military missile arsenal that is bigger than the US or Russia. They are into space. We're going to have to compete, and we're going to have to be clear-eyed about it. And I think our best defense is deterrence. Our best defense is to be prepared so that any country that would mess with the United States, being Russia, China, would know that the price would be too high for them. That's why we build up our defenses. And sometimes I would hear European colleagues say, oh, well, we don't need to spend so much on defense because we have all of these, and now healthcare concerns as well as social concerns. We have to build up our defenses. That is our safety net. And it is to deter aggression by other powers. And we are seeing the rise of superpower competition, big power competition. And if we keep our eye on the ball, which America will be the leader to do, but we want our allies and partners with us, we will be able to defeat any adversary. But it's because we are going to keep our eye on the ball.
What were the leaders telling you after the attack on the Capitol?
Oh, that was a very hard time. It was, of course, painful for me to see our treasured capital be ransacked the way it was. And our allies were very sympathetic about it. They totally, while of course they were shocked that it would be America having this kind of experience, nevertheless, they also renewed our overall resolve. And what I said to them is, I can't paper over how horrible this is, but we will prevail, because our democracy is not just about freedom to vote. The democracy that we have, and especially in America, is the institutions that are protected by this democracy, the Constitution that requires that when the people speak, their wishes are implemented, and the institutions will prevail. And the building of the institutions in our democracies is what I think set our course in the right direction, and also is our overall protector. And I think that resonated with the Allies, and they were sympathetic, knowing how hard this would be for America to see our own capital be attacked in that way. But we will prevail. The justice will prevail, and we now know that we were not prepared. And I know that my colleagues in the Senate and in Congress are going to assure that that will never happen again, that we will never be surprised like that again, and that the people who perpetrated those acts, like reading in the news about Nancy Pelosi's stolen computer being offered to the Russians. Oh my gosh. I mean, that needs to be, I mean, going to court, of course, where everyone's rights are protected, but that cannot stand. We cannot ever have another action like that again. And I don't think we will, because I think everyone, every patriotic American will agree.
And my last question to you is, you have done so much between your ambassadorship. You were a United States Senator for Texas for 20 years. You were served in the Texas House as Texas State Treasurer. You've left quite a legacy of service to Texans. What do you think about that? What comes to mind when you look back at everything you've done?
Oh, um, I've been so fortunate. I don't think about it in those terms so much. I do love Texas so much, and I think that Texas has shown the kind of governance that is attracting people. You see now so many companies moving to Texas, so many people from states that are overregulated and overtaxed moving to Texas because they see our form of government, which I certainly participated in as state treasurer and in the legislature, to make sure that we didn't have a state income tax. I was a leader in that effort in Texas, and to make sure that our regulatory system is honest and transparent, and only when it's needed, to try to make sure that our businesses can thrive, to have a great economy and create jobs. You need a steady, good regulatory system that isn't overbearing and over bureaucratized. And so I look back on the things that have been put in place that are really making a difference for Texas. And of course, now internationally, I always knew the importance, of course, of America's leadership, but never more than the last 3.5 years. America must lead. We have the capability, we have the creativity, we have everything that it takes to assure our security, which also secures our economy. And so being able to be a part of that has been really an honor, and I'm so pleased that I've had the opportunities that I have.
Well, former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchison, thank you so much for your time and all of your insight today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for reaching out.